Yes, he doesn't like him. He would prefer he deal with somebody else. But the fact of the matter is personalities can only play so big of a role when there's a war going on.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today we've spoken to Garrett Ziegler. He's a former aide in the Trump administration in his first term. We've spoken to him about this war of words, this hate relationship that Trump and Zelensky have. Do they hate each other? Do they like each other? How far does this date back? So much has to do with the Bidens and Trump wanting them investigated way back when, Trump weaponizing military aid. He revokes military aid to Ukraine when he has a disagreement with Zelensky. So we're getting into the bottom of this relationship. He says it dates back longer than we think, and how this has something to do with Hunter Biden's laptop. So tune into the Trump Report. You can see us every day, Monday through Friday, on Times Radio's YouTube. So much has happened with this war of words between Donald Trump and President Zelensky in the last month or so. And it obviously came to a head last Friday with that insane meeting in the Oval Office. And then, of course, this coupled now with the fact that Trump has officially frozen military aid being sent to Ukraine. How dire do you think the relationship is between these two?
Well, it's dire, but I don't think that it's totally ruined. Mostly because Trump isn't really that interested in Zelensky per se. I don't think he likes him as a person, as an interlocutor. But the bigger issue is that people are still dying by the thousands, I think, if we can trust the data coming out of Ukraine or Russia. We don't know precisely how many people are dying per day, but that seems to be Trump's biggest concern. He said it last night in the congressional speech that went on for an hour and 45 minutes. He talked about that war alone for 5 minutes. So I think that, yes, he doesn't like him. He would prefer he deal with somebody else. But the fact of the matter is personalities can only play so big of a role when there's a war going on. So I think that any disrespect, any ill will towards them can ultimately be resolved by just sticking your head down and focusing on the bigger picture, which is that this has gone on for over 3 years. So I don't buy into the idea that personalities ultimately dictate how wars end. I think that there are bigger forces at play here. There's billions of dollars in mineral deals that could be struck. I think, knowing a lot about how Trump thinks, whatever his opinions are of Zelensky personally, they have a ton of natural gas and rare earth minerals under Zelensky's feet. And that could outweigh any animosity he has over Zelensky.
But the tension between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, Garrett, it dates back before Russia even invaded Ukraine. Can you break it down for our audience how this disagreement between the two led to Donald Trump being impeached in 2020?
So it goes back almost 6 years. So Zelensky, as you know, the comedian bankrolled by Ihor Kolomoisky, the oligarch in Ukraine, who's essentially in exile right now, was arrested. Zelensky gets elected in 2019. July 2019, just months after Zelensky gets into office, there's a phone call in which a half a dozen topics are discussed. Two of them are really, really sensitive politically. The first one is he talks about CrowdStrike, which was the entity tasked with going through the DNC server. If you go through the transcript, July 25th, 2019, he's going to talk about CrowdStrike and how the server could be in Ukraine. This is in the transcript. The second thing, which I know more about, was him asking Zelensky, and I'm quoting from the transcript, to look into the Biden matter. And the ironic thing, Maddie, and what value add I can provide is Trump didn't know this at the time, but his IRS and DOJ had already started an investigation into Hunter. But the U.S. bureaucracy is so big that he didn't know that. So this whole idea that it was improper to look into these allegations was belied by the fact that the DOJ was already looking into Hunter, but he didn't know that when he asked Zelensky. And not just they were looking into Hunter, Maddie, they were looking into the exact allegations that Trump alluded to in the call. In fact, the investigation into Hunter started officially in November of 2018. So Trump is having this call with the leader. So leader to leader, they're talking, but at the worker bee level, the young guy level, like myself, the people who actually do the work, it was the investigation was already ongoing. So it couldn't have been improper. This is again my opinion. If the career civil servants had determined that this was legitimate to look into and that there was corruption involved here, it wasn't so much that Trump asked, it's that this was a very, very sensitive issue for the opposition in the United States. And there was another way to look at it that was more sinister. Remember, when this was all going on in 2019, so he got impeached, I think, December 20th of 2019 or January 2nd of 2020. It was right at the turn of the year. When that was occurring, the public didn't know that there was an active investigation into Hunter because the civil servants did their job and they didn't leak the existence of the investigation. The only reason why we know post facto that the bureaucracies had already started investigating Hunter was because of the IRS whistleblowers, which came forward actually the week I met you in the summer of 2023. So, with the benefit of hindsight, we now realize that this 6 year saga was, in my opinion, played up more than what it was because of those IRS whistleblowers.
God, the IRS whistleblower is such an interesting situation in itself. And for anyone wondering what we're alluding to, this 2018 federal investigation into Hunter Biden was talking about whether he had committed tax crimes, whether he'd lied on a form when he bought a firearm, and foreign lobbying and money laundering. And he was found guilty on all of them. So it ended up being, yes, a successful case. And of course, these IRS whistleblowers, before he was found guilty, these two very brave men, Gary Shapley and Tristan Ziegler? I can't remember.
Joe Ziegler. His
yes.
lawyer is Tristan Levitt. No relation to me, by the way.
Of course, I always wondered.
joke that Hunter wants to kill every single person with the surname
Ziegler
Ziegler. I can assure you we're not related.
Well, I did interview Tristan Levitt, their lawyer, and it was a very interesting situation about them coming out saying the IRS had botched the investigation and had given the president's son preferential treatment in every single way that it could. But keeping kind of on topic, so we had that situation where Donald Trump has gone to Zelensky and asked him to investigate the Biden family for these various things. But then, of course, you were given a copy of Hunter Biden's laptop in 2019, and within it kind of showed a tangled web of personal and professional scandals for Joe Biden's son. And I've seen the laptop as you gave me access to it a year and a half ago, and it was a pretty interesting situation that went on there. But despite this ongoing lawsuit between you and Hunter Biden, Garrett, what were the dodgy business deals that was between the Bidens and Ukrainian companies that was cause for concern, that sparked concern for Donald Trump?
So there's the blatant corruption, again, my opinion, that Hunter was put on the board of a natural gas company at the very moment his father was the point person for the United States and Ukraine. That alone in a vacuum is very suspicious and corrupt. But what makes it a bigger story, Maddie, is that the very industry that Hunter was appointed a board member of in the natural gas was very geopolitically fraught with Russia. That's what's key to this, right? It's not just that he got a nepotistic role for $183,000 a month or $166,000 a month. Sorry, that was the monthly retainer that the Ukrainian oligarch paid to Hunter, 166 grand a month. He split it with another guy, Devin Archer, but still, it's that very company was involved in the eastern portion of Ukraine with fighting the Russians, literally. That's why I mentioned Ihor Kolomoisky at the beginning of the interview, because Ihor Kolomoisky was the one who funded almost all of Zelensky's campaign, and Ihor Kolomoisky was responsible for funding some of the wells that Burisma was constructing in eastern Ukraine. So it had to do with the fight over Crimea, which you know very much
Mm.
about in 2014. Well, it started in 2014, and so Hunter is embroiled not just in this nepotistic ploy, but going back 11 years now to when the U.S. basically pushed along Yanukovych's ouster. So once you pan the picture out to those to where it's an 11-year story, it's wild. It's one of the greatest scandals of the 21st century, in my opinion, because it spans multiple countries, billions of dollars, natural resources, and foreign policy.
Yeah. And then what about Viktor Shokin, Garrett? Because that was a bit of a scandal from, and that's not necessarily to blame Zelensky, but this is the Biden family, Joe and Hunter, strong-arming the Ukrainian government to fire a Ukrainian prosecutor. Can you walk us through what happened there?
Yes, great point. So that's the background. But the specific charge of Joe in this, apart from him being the point person, is that Viktor Shokin was the prosecutor general in Ukraine, basically the Ukraine's equivalent of the attorney general. He was looking, we only know this now because of internal Ukrainian documents. They had an investigation into Burisma, and and a lot of people on the right and some honest people on the left have alleged that um, when Joe demanded the firing of Shokin, this occurred in December 2015, January 2016, he did so for the improper purpose of shutting down a query into the company that his son was on the board of. And the big lie, I'll call it, the big lie that was said during the first impeachment of Donald Trump was that nobody, or basically that nobody wanted Shokin in the job. That it wasn't just Joe Biden and the Americans who wanted Shokin out. But through again the 2020 vision of hindsight, we now have documents that show that the EU approved of the job that Shokin was doing. And the reason why we know that and why we have documentation for it is because the EU, along with the United States, had to evaluate a loan guarantee that was given by the IMF. And as part of that due diligence process, they had to evaluate whether or not the reforms going on by Shokin were passing muster. And according to them, they were. We have two documents, one from July and one from October of 2015. But then, come December 2015, Joe changes course. So the official U.S. policy all throughout 2015 is that Shokin is instituting reforms and is trying to clean up the prosecutor general's office. But once emails, and because we have his laptop, and we laid out the laptop in our book, but once we looked through the laptop, we saw that in December of 2015, tons of emails come through from the executives of Burisma to Hunter saying, we need this investigation to cease. And sure enough, Joe, like clockwork, changes the official position of the U.S. government to this guy has to go. And that's where you get the infamous bragging that he did at the Council on Foreign Relations when he said, if the prosecutor ain't fired, you ain't getting the money. Well, son of a B, he got
Yeah.
fired. You know, he's talking in January of 2018 at that event, Maddie. So that's 2 years later, and Joe doesn't think that's ever going to come up again. He thinks the situation's dead. That's why he's freewheeling so easy, and he brags like that.
There's so many moving parts to this Hunter Biden situation and Joe Biden situation with Ukraine. And for anyone wondering what Burisma is, it's of course the Ukrainian gas company that Hunter Biden was on the board of, and it's actually the company he worked for in those years that he did not pay tax. Various tax years that he was convicted of, he paid back the money, but some of those years, 2014 to 2015, the tax years were left to expire, so he didn't end up paying the money he had earned from
Great point.
Burisma. But Garrett, basically in layman's terms, Trump as president in 2019, he blocks a congressional mandated $400 million of military aid to be sent to Ukraine because Zelensky didn't do what he asked him to do. He didn't investigate the Bidens like he asked. Is that correct?
I would dispute that, but I don't think it's a big deal whether or not I dispute it because I think he was legal to hold it. Meaning, even if he did do what the Democrats allege, and I've always taken this position, as the executive, as somebody who's charged with ensuring, I think the exact wording in the Constitution is taking care that the laws be faithfully executed. He's is totally within the president's authority to determine whether or not foreign aid is going to a corrupt purpose and withholding that. So
Mm.
I think that even if he did withhold it, because again, I didn't investigate the case. I wasn't working on the House Republican side or House Senate side when all this was going through. Even if they did what he said he did, I don't think it's illegal because the very point of him asking, not demanding, but asking Zelensky to do this held muster, in my opinion, because our own IRS was looking at those payments because, like you said, there was an active money laundering and tax investigation going on. He was
Mm.
totally within his right to say, hey, something smells here. You ought to really dig into this. Now, I think if Trump was guilty of anything in that scenario, it was being naive. That Zelensky was honorable and would do the honorable thing. Zelensky had no motive to look into this because if he did, there were going to be unsavory characters in the Ukraine who showed up, which he would have no motive to expose. So I
Mm.
think it was naive. I think Trump was naive to ask him it, but he was
And
right to do so.
and of course, the impeachment led to nothing. That it was all dropped, and it was found that he hadn't really done anything corrupt in that sense. But Garrett, it's kind of Groundhog Day because we watched Trump withhold this military aid to Ukraine back then, and we're watching him do it again. He's strong-arming Zelensky again to sign this minerals deal.
Well, I think that he has a bigger goal in mind here. I'm obviously have a different personality than Trump, but I think that he's one of the greatest political figures in American history, maybe for sure the 21st century. I don't think I'd know enough to say that he's one of the greatest political, in terms of just pure comeback. I mean, the guy got shot and died at 91 times, and he's the president again. But he's very acquisitive, and I think that he looks at the 300 billion that the United States has given them as a total boondoggle that we can't account for a lot of the money, and it was useless because the Russians are still stronger than the Ukrainians. So I'm to give the audience sort of a view in. I think Trump is obsessed with making that money back and hopefully getting it back with interest. So
Mm.
whatever he's doing right now, if I'm watching Trump from the sideline, I don't know anything about him, I would urge people to look into the money that the United States gave them from 22 to when he became president again, and he's trying to figure out a way to make that money back. He
Well,
doesn't want that money to go into a black hole.
No, Garrett, you can understand that as an American taxpayer, you want money to be put back into the pockets of Americans, especially after a very volatile last few years with COVID and the war and a near recession, if you want to call it a recession. And it has been very hard on the Americans. But on the flip side, it as allies, as the English, as the Australian, look at America and think, what's the point in asking for a payout right now when the war's not finished? And a lot of people are happy giving aid in any capacity to a country that is struggling. But Ukraine does seem to be holding its ground when it comes to troops on the ground. But some
Well, I
people,
don't think that Trump wants a check tomorrow. What he
yeah,
wants,
he
and
wants a
this is my
stake.
perception
He
of it.
wants a stake, and you can
Yeah, he
understand that.
wants an interest in the actual physical deposits.
It's
So
a
we might
smart
not even,
move.
yeah,
Sorry, Gary. It is a
yeah.
smart move. I completely understand. Donald Trump's main focus for the next 4 years is to prove to America that he can get the economy on track, that he will leave.
True.
If he leaves after 4 years, we don't know if he's going to somehow change the Constitution, to say that he left Americans with money in their pockets. He made that campaign promise. You can understand why Americans, and Donald Trump is the face of that, why they're fed up of fronting the bill all the time. I can completely understand that. I just think the narrative right now is just be there for Ukraine, help them out, because we have no idea about what kind of wider war Putin will orchestrate if we aren't there financially and in a military sense to help Ukraine out. But I just want to ask you this. One of the last questions is, whatever hate or kind of disputes or disagreements there is between Zelensky and Trump, a lot of people think that it's justified, while some people don't think it is justified. Do you think, as someone that's worked in Trump's administration, Garrett, do you think that Trump's grudges keep driving him? Is it all about the grudges that he keeps for years to come, that those who don't help him out when he asks?
Well, I think that everybody should evaluate what the ultimate purpose of any grievance would be. If his disagreements are personal in nature and aren't about the national interest, then they're not productive. But if he is sparring with Zelensky in order for the United States to gain an advantage in hopes that Zelensky will concede to the US's demands, then I'm all for it. Because I care, meaning that I don't think, and you're going to hear this a lot from the American media, that it's all personal for him. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that his ultimate goal, it's not to say that he doesn't have personal interest, but if in 2027, hypothetically, let's fast forward a little bit, if in 2027 Donald Trump still personally hates Zelensky, but the United States gets their money back for this war, then he'll be happy, even though he personally hates Zelensky. So it's all about, in his mind, it's all about the U.S. winning.
And I know
that sounds trite. Yeah.
You're right. Garrett Ziegler, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you very much for having me. God bless you.